Donor and community engagement. One person office. Wow. Power to you. Welcome. Lauren, would you mind giving me screen sharing abilities? I have some stuff that I think could be good to kind of get us going. I'd also love to throw in the chat what you're hoping to gain from today's session. I have some stuff we can have like an open conversation, but I also want to take you through a little bit of my material and really think about, as you're looking into Q2, which is starting in a few days, maybe what are some areas that might be able to give you some more leverage and a plan that you can put in place to support you.
Diaris, are you able to use the screen share abilities?
I am now.
Perfect.
I'm going to try to rearrange my screen so I can make sure I can still see the chat as we're doing that. So as I just mentioned, if you can throw in what you hope to gain from today's session, if there's anything that you'd like me to cover in particular, and I'm happy to flex to make this helpful for everyone here. Competing priorities, definitely hear that one. All right, so I'm going to get us started. Thank you so much, Lauren, for having me. Appreciate the solidarity because I'm in this too. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and also a little bit more about what I'm hoping to do for today. I want to go over sort of like how do you recharge a little bit and how do you think about fighting burnout, particularly as a fundraiser. I always like to also connect people to resilience, right? Because sometimes I think it could be really disappointing to think that so many people could also be suffering burnout like you. But one of the things that is a silver lining of that is that means that so many people can try so many things that just might be perfect for you. Or they've tried things that you don't have the time to have put in practice yourself, and hopefully with some nuance and with some open conversation and transparency, you can figure out what's the best resource for you in this season. So resilience is about how you recharge and not really about how you endure. So I want to make sure that we also take space for restorative time. So a little bit about me, please add me on LinkedIn. I think that's going to be a good way for us to connect. I have a QR code on the screen that should make that fairly easy. Hopefully that works. I currently work also as a fundraiser for a nonprofit, a national nonprofit called Management Leadership for Tomorrow. I was a fellow in one of their career prep programs when I was an undergrad at UCLA. They helped me get one of my internships that was very coveted part of my experience in undergrad. I also have a master's in organization and leadership and an MBA from Emory. And I've done a lot of different things, but part of why I do this work is because prior to joining MLT about a year ago, I was doing more consulting and I was looking at marketing consulting, and I saw that so many opportunities for marketers in particular. And as you're thinking about AI and as you're thinking about new tools, we're going to burn out the people that we're going to do the work, especially those that are in helping professions, right? So if you're working in nursing, if you're a caregiver for a parent or for children, then you're just more likely to get burned out. And we need to have more of a conversation about this. And I started this, my company, InWell, because I believe intentional well-being is wealth. And what we can do together is better than what we can do alone. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm happy to take questions and stuff. I'm going to try to monitor the chat as much as I can, but Lauren, if you can help me with that and let me know if anything comes up or if anyone has a pressing concern, feel free to unmute. So my objectives for today are really to kind of go over like the context of like, hey, what is burnout? I know we're like all feeling it, but what is it actually defined as? To really open a conversation so that you can feel the solidarity of what's here and maybe present some solutions, give you some time to reflect on what are some things that you can do in the next week, in the next month as you're thinking about Q2, and then looking at some action steps. Is there anything else that we want to cover? Give me a moment. Okay, looking at some faces.
These look great.
Thank you, Lauren. So I like to start with just what is burnout and what are the key dimensions, right? If there are any other chronic high achievers, like I think that I would raise my hand here because that is one of the things that made it hard for me to personally relate to like my burnout because I so identify with my ability to achieve and my interest in helping people in service that this particular exhaustion and inefficacy like really hits me hard. Like when I'm been burnt out in the past, you know, and also just taking a real anti-burnout approach to my work, my planning. For me, that looks like how am I scoping out my projects? How does that get in? We use Asana at work, and that's one of my favorite project management tools. Like how am I capturing the ideas of what could be done, but how am I also saying, here's what's not going to be done? Because ultimately burnout is exhaustion. It's like that loss of enthusiasm for your work. And then ultimately you're just not able to do things at the quality or standard that you may have set for yourself, which for high achievers and recovering perfectionists could be particularly hard to deal with as you're challenging your identity there. All right. And there are 6 key contributing factors of burnout. So I'd love to get to hear more about, what's in your realm of control. So thank you for telling me the teams of one and the different positions that you have, because there are key contributing factors that we all have different levels of influence and control over. But essentially one is workload, which I think helps is a big one for many of us fundraisers because there's always more you could be doing to get that job done. Or if you're a big utility player, when you have a lot of skills and you can kind of do design, you could do copywriting, you could do phone making and outreaching, all these things, it could really feel like the work is never ending. So that's one. Another one is a perceived lack of control, right? So maybe you're inheriting a campaign that may not have been designed the way that you would have done it in the past or would have chosen for yourself this time. Another one is rewards and recognition. When I'm leading teams, this is a big way that I try to change the culture of a team because it shows me how do I want to uplift people and what are some of the behaviors that I think are great. Because when you don't do that and you're not intentional, sometimes you get that values misalignment, which is also a big contributing factor to burnout. So that looks like, hey, I thought I really cared about kids, but now I don't care about any kids. Or like, I only care about my kids, or I only care about the kids that get to go home. And the values misalignment could be big, but spaces like this are important because we have community. And community is when you have a lack of community, that can make you feel like more likely to burn out. But when you have community and you're using these spaces intentionally, that can help you in your journey. But you always need to feel like things are fair. So those are the top contributing factors of burnout. And that's through some research out of UC Berkeley by Christina Maslach. So I want to pause here to see if anyone has anything to add about some of these key contributing factors. Anything that stands out to you, anything that you find you want to dig a little deeper into today. I'm thinking probably the workload piece, but if there's anything else for this group here, I'd love to cater this to what's important to you.
Hi, this is Denise. I think one of the things that I think about too are competing responsibilities. You know, we have family, we have community, we have work. so many different aspects of our lives. And when all of a sudden, every single one of those is calling for our attention, I think that helps to contribute as well.
For sure. And what have you done in the past when do you feel like it was always sort of this way? And now the responsibilities are getting more and more. Or are there some tools that you've used in the past that maybe aren't working so well now? Curious in your own experience.
I think just having some like alone time at home had kind of helped, maybe reading or listening to music or, doing something outside the house, whatever. And I now have my 85-year-old mom living with me. So it is a little bit harder to have some of that separate time or that quiet time.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I definitely understand the competing priorities. And I think, they always say like women can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. It's kind of one of those situations, but it's also that we need to learn how to set some really strong boundaries. And unfortunately, when you are exhausted or already in the thick of burnout, it could be hard to set up what are the structures, what are the routines, what are the rituals that would be really helpful to you. I like to particularly look at sort of like micro habits. And so if I'm in a really busy season, one of the things that I like to do is say, what can I let go of? I mean, what can I not do? Like if I work full time, I'm an adjunct professor, I have my business, and I can't do them all at the same time. I can't run a fundraising campaign and launch a product at the same time. I can't, I'll take time off when I'm going to do presentations with my students. But for me, it's really about looking at like where are my restorative spaces, and then how do I get more of that more often? And I try to do it as simple as a mindful sip of water, something that's so easy, doesn't cost a lot of money, that I can look to and that can kind of reset me quickly. I also might light a candle, I might get up, and it really helps me to have a gratitude practice as well with the competing priorities. And then ultimately, if you're looking at your workload and there are just too many things for the time, or they require an inordinate amount of energy, then I think it's about the prioritization of getting more resources, or lessening the drain of some particular resource activities, whether that's, help at home. For me, it ends up being, there are weeks I completely take cooking off the table. Like it has to be the simplest meals possible. I have to order them pre-made, or I'm just going to eat salads, because I know that I need to use my energy for something different. But it's going to be an ongoing thing. And I think that the thing that I love about working with people in nonprofits and people that are impact driven is that your ambition is for a reason, and it's going to help serve a lot of people. But unfortunately, that means when we have higher rates of burnout, higher rates of attrition from the space or from our organizations, there's just also more at stake. So I think going beyond our self-care and really looking at spaces like this and how do we cultivate them to be supportive of our needs, where we can vent if we need to, but we also can come up with solutions. We can figure out how we can expand our bandwidth. Those are all things that I try to intentionally cultivate in any groups and teams that I coach. Anything else for anybody or comments, please? So I'm happy to, if Lauren, if you want to give me everyone's email, I actually have like a quick like coaching guide on the 12 stages of burnout. These are really looking at different stages that have different symptoms, right? So you might identify with like being excessively ambitious or neglecting your needs. Like, I don't know why it takes 7 business days to do a load of laundry and get it put away or almost put away. But these are some of the things that impact us. And, when we have competing priorities, we have to allow some things to accept some levels of standards. And for those recovering perfectionists, this becomes really important because that can feed into the burnout. So I'm happy to provide sort of like more on each of the stages, and I have different actions and practices that you can do that are as small as like the mindful sip of water to, scheduling a lunch with a friend to leveraging different resources in order to make sure that you're staying mindful about what is happening within your burnout journey. But ultimately, it goes from, the ambition to just like working harder, being like, okay, I'll send 3 more emails and I'll add 4 more segments, and, looking at getting angry at your child or your spouse or your partner when it's really not the source of the conflict. All these things sort of help happen from like a psychological standpoint, because burnout, while we spend so much time at work, it really bleeds into the other things that are important in our lives. So happy to share more about these. I want to make sure I leave more time to actually go through some of the challenges that people have this quarter, this week, so we can it's a Monday. So I don't know how you all are, love your Mondays like you love your Fridays, but I want to make sure that if there's anything that feels urgent that we can work on. But Lauren, I'll share sort of my document with you, and just got some coaching questions, got the practice. I think it'll be helpful. And then if you didn't know, work-life balance is core. And I think it's not really about having a balance to each perfect day. While that works for some people that are great with the consistency and ritual, for me, I think it's not about prescribing what works best for me. It's more about changing the way that you're critically engaging with your life, your responsibilities, your resources, your village. And at the end of the day, it impacts, I like to think about it as like, if you're burnt out at work, you might be angry at the cashier at your grocery store. It's going to impact how you're dealing with your finances, how you're dealing with your family members, how you're dealing with your life in an election year, or in times when the world is like really challenging. And you might have been a person that had the space to really engage with some of those deeper values. But as you become more burned out, you just don't really have the time and space to do that. So I like to think about how do we really reflect on how it's impacting us, because it really can lead to death, like not burnout in of itself, but sort of like that lack of care. Because they say like 85% of doctor's visits are related to stress to begin with, right? So how we manage stress when we spend most of our time at work is going to be a crucial part of how we contribute to our families, how we contribute to our communities. So I'd love to hear from you in the chat. How do you use your time away from the office? Particularly, I'm curious if anyone schedules PTO, or if you're taking time away as needed during the day. If you need to go out and take that walk, if you have a pet, like what does that look like for you? What are some of the things that you're doing on a regular basis? And if you're on mobile or something and prefer to come off mute, I'm happy to hear your voice as well. Okay, we got some dog walkers. Are people taking PTO? Okay. Scheduling time to go to the gym during normal work days to make up for overtime. I like that. I think one of the things that I struggled with a lot in different times in my career, one is when I was managing a team, I felt like I couldn't take as much time off until I realized that I wasn't giving other people the opportunity to step up within that. And I realized, oh, I might be selfish by not planning my PTO to give other people opportunities to lead. But I also didn't often give myself credit for the work before the work, right? Like the ability to think clearly before the words are on an email or before the slides are designed. And so now I've been giving myself a lot more credit for some of those inputs into my work as well. which I think provides me with a little bit more balance and harmony throughout my day. Any other comments? Keep it going. So one of the things that's been really important to me as I think about burnout and I think about managing campaigns as a fundraiser and just managing my values and my interests and particularly like my career goals is this idea of energy versus time management. So I think we learn a lot about time management. You know, there are going to be tons of books about the 4-hour work week and, you know, have these powerful habits and, you know, color code your Google Calendar and schedule everything and give yourself a buffer time. But what that misses is the energy management for me, which is really more core to how I like to function. And, um, you know, I like to look at it from a quarterly basis or like from a weekly basis. What are the things and activities that are going to give me more energy? So, like, I just had a conversation with a new colleague, and it was just like one of those energizing conversations where you feel like you can be seen, you can, you know, for me, spitball some like creative ideas that might be able to give me some more leverage, help me figure out what barriers can be unblocked, um, and help me feel like less alone in some of the like big goals that I have that ultimately feel like I have to do all the steps, which makes me less excited sometimes about getting it done. Um, but I'm curious for you on a regular basis, do you feel like you are managing your time or your energy more, or none of the above? Nancy, I see. Okay, I see time. I see your note, Nancy, about boundaries. Boundaries can also be helped with managing your time for sure. But if anyone's seen a Snickers commercial and knows how real that is, right? Like it's the energy part of how you show up is also important. Um, yeah, so I think particularly for us in sort of helping professions when we're managing time, we're managing what people see, right? We're managing things that people expectations people have for ourselves, have for us, and then sometimes what we have for ourselves as well. And I think I've been trying to have a blend, a hybrid of it, where if I'm going to have a meeting with a donor or a senior leader, then I'm going to need more time to prepare. And that preparation might look like me sitting in my lounge chair behind me with you know, some tea, and or it might look like me just hanging out by a window or taking a walk and taking my little notebook to a park in my neighborhood where I'm kind of preparing like mentally for that, because that energy part matters. And there's that intersection of, you know, giving yourself time to recover, to restore, or to protect your space and your energy as well. And I know we had a comment sort of about boundaries, but boundaries is also about what we do, right? More so than us controlling other people, right? So I know I have a boundary of, you know, I'm going to need to eat before a particular meeting. I know that I need to have some kind of physical activity before I'm like leading particular kinds of sessions, because that helps me feel alert. And if someone's going to schedule time when I'm not able to do that, I will cancel that. You know, I will reschedule or propose another time. So I think it's important to kind of identify those spaces. And I'm curious around Nancy, who mentioned energy as our one of our only people to do that. If you had any notes that you wanted to add about managing your energy. No pressure. Um, and I think it's helpful as I'm talking to you, hopefully not at you. Um, please take the moment to use the chat and share any reflections you have that might be supportive to other people, or just as you're processing, if that's the kind of processor you are, I think that could be helpful in the community space. So now I want to take some time to really think about, what do you have on deck? What is happening this week? What is happening in Q2? Do you have a big fundraiser coming up? What's been a challenge? And I'd love to workshop some of that for you and figure out where we can find some leverage and where we can put together some anti-burnout practices so that you're not finding yourself in this endless cycle where you're like, okay, I'm going to have a vacation, but now I know I'm going to need a vacation from my vacation because the work never stopped, and the chores didn't get done, and the things didn't happen when they said they were going to happen. So I want to make sure I leave some time for us to do this, and collaborate here. So if anyone would like to come off mute and share sort of like your circumstance, could be from this week. It really helps for it to be more specific, so that we can be more helpful.
I'm happy to chat.
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Hi, my name is Karen. I work for Monmouth Conservation Foundation. I do, like many, multiple jobs. So I do all of our fundraising, all of our communications, and I'm mailing out 100 big packets in front of me, and I have 2 grant deadlines on Friday, and just, $1.3 million to raise by June 30th. No pressure. And I haven't done our annual report yet. And it's just one project amidst all of my deadlines that I have the outline done, and I've missed my deadline of my target of getting it out. And I just keep saying to myself each weekend, okay, you have to either block 2 days and just do nothing else but write it, or you need to sprinkle in time every day. But it just keeps getting pushed to the side as not important of a priority. And then it's keeping me up, and I'm stressed, and I'm not making any progress.
Is it true that you're not making any progress, or that you're not making progress on your goals in terms of like what you'd expect to have been here? So what have you got done over the last week?
I've gotten a lot done. I mean, I submitted 3 grants last week, and, got meetings with the important funders and got other projects done. It's just, I'm not making progress on the annual report.
Well, you have an outline.
I've had that outline for several months. So yeah. Yes.
And is there no support on the on filling out some of the data? Like, do you need help on like the analysis part? Like, is it a design thing? Is it literally
We do have a contracted, designer. So once I provide content, he will actually piece it together. It's just me and him, basically. So I feel like there's no excuse. I just need to I got to get past this, either block time or, other priorities have to suffer, I guess. But
well, out of the things that you named for this week, you said that there's a grant due on Friday, 2 grants due this week.
right, which I feel like, no one's going to pick up the phone and say, hey, I haven't received my annual report yet. But if I don't get this grant submitted, we're not going to potentially get that money, and it's a bigger deal. So I feel like that's what happens. These bigger, more pressing deadlines take priority.
And in the grand scheme of the annual report, how impactful is that? I know it's kind of an arbitrary deadline for you.
Yeah.
Is it that 2,000 people read it last year and they expect it on this particular day?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we can see our open rates of the email. And I think it's more of, when we've had this conversation internally, that is this critical? Do we have to do it? And I'm not winning that argument. That there's just strong feelings that we have to do it. We do it every year. But yeah, I think, it's a calendar year report. It's already late. I feel like most people get their annual reports out late. The world is not shutting down, but it does have to happen at some point.
And have you looked at, I'm just gathering information here. Have you looked at the overlap between what you have to turn in the reports on Friday in terms of talking about your results? And if there's overlap between that, because you might be further along completing those grants if you're also telling a story about what you did last year?
Yeah, actually, I think a lot of our grants have summed that stuff up really nicely. And, we're pulling from things that we've announced. So that's why I think it's just 2 days of sitting and compiling that information. On one hand, it's not that heavy of a lift because it's out there. I just have to gather it and piece it together in a different format. So yes, that has helped. I've made some nice, like for us as a land trust, like many other people here, I've found some nice comparisons in our grant of how much we've preserved equals this as the size of Colt's Neck or whatever. So yeah, that's a positive. Thank you. I have some more things I could pull from that I've done.
Okay, yeah, that's some good progress. So one of the things that I like to do, like when I feel like I don't have any agency or there's just too much going on, is to kind of go through some of our key questions. So you mentioned levers that you can adjust, or that people, mainly on the annual report, you have the designer that you can go through. I wonder if there's any other support in gathering, if there's somebody that's read past grant reports that might want to pull out some of the things that you've had before. You could also provide like a Mad Lib or a template kind of thing of go and search and find these things. You could also use AI to support in some of that. I would caution you on some of those, depending on how much private information you would have within that. But I think you're a lot further than you thought, but it often helps to figure out like if there are people that can support. So are there any other people are there any aspects of the work that you're doing that do not need to be you?
Just the financial piece, and I got that from our colleague. Our 990 is done, so I have those figures already from a colleague that I will format and plug in, but I don't think anything else.
Once you do it, does somebody review it?
Yes, our executive director will review the whole thing once I write it.
And have they reviewed the outline?
Yes.
Can they identify opportunities for you to abbreviate? Like if you can't scope down of like, hey, we're not going to do the annual report, can you reduce some of the sections?
Yeah, maybe.
Can
Yeah,
you
maybe
give
we could talk about it more and prioritize.
Okay, so that would be one. The other thing that I also think about within people for everyone is when I need to do something that I am struggling to do for whatever reason. One of the things that I find really helpful is borrowing from those that work with people with ADHD or autism. One of the things that they do is body doubling, right? So literally having someone in a room or on a camera that is doing the same thing as you, or having the same kind of energy, can be really helpful. Focus Mate is one of the things that I've done to just kind of get a random person at a random time and say like, hey, for the next 50 minutes, I'm committing to you that I'm going to work on building out this outline, and they will tell you what they're working on. You can do that. I also, on my week, just yesterday, actually, with a friend, I did like co-working sessions, and it could be like, hey, we can work on your thing together. Let's figure out where you're getting stuck. You have a timeline for that. We'll spend 45 minutes for you. We'll do 45 minutes on me, and we'll work independently and see what we do by the end of that time. So that's another way that you can leverage people in your village or people as in strangers on the internet to kind of hold you to some accountability piece. And those are free.
I love that.
We also went through approach in terms of how can you scale the idea, right? So how can you take the feedback that you have? You could also plug that into ChatGPT or figure out like what are some areas where what's going to be the most impactful. Since you have less time, I don't know your interests. Like typically, I'd make some of the decisions based on data because I can just nerd out on some of that. Like, hey, somebody wants me to write a blog or to do something on the website, but I know our blog has 300 people that will read it, but 10,000 people are going to read this email that I send. So I make some of those decisions based on the data in that case, or what I see is doing really well for other organizations, or sort of like role models for a particular campaign. Another area is environment. So how do you make something more enjoyable? Can you pair like, hey, I've been wanting to get out to walk my dog or to take, my kids to this place. Can I do an aspect of that, within that? Or can I clean this one corner of my table and sit there instead of at my desk or on the sofa? Like, I'll only sit on the sofa when I'm doing this thing because I've made this kind of progress. Books like Atomic Habits and Essentialism talk about the importance of making it really easy to do the things that you want to do and making it really hard to do the things that are going to draw you away from that. So if you're finding yourself watching TV, they might say the extreme of unplug your TV, pick it up, put it in a closet, in order to do that. Or, some authors have their assistant like only give them one change of clothes so they wouldn't go outside, right? So like they wouldn't go outside, they wouldn't get, distracted by other things, and try to think about what are things within your control. And environment is generally things that we can control or influence, at least if we live with people. Time, I think we've got through some of that, right? So we talked about with Karen's example of clearly we have the hard deadline of the grants that need to be in, but maybe we can figure out what are some of the intermediate steps within that, and what are some of the things that can help move it along within the support. And then obviously always grounding ourselves in our why. Like, what's the purpose of this? Is it as important as it was? Is it important, in the grand scheme of things? And I think in this particular case, it's also important for this group of people to think about what's important to you. Like, sometimes we need to have the selfish piece of our work of like, hey, like this is going to take me a little longer because I really wanted to, play in design, or I really wanted to do something differently in Canva. So I'm going to have the designer, make this in Canva so that they actually don't need all the data. Like, I can just go in and fill in the information when I have it, and kind of can get things moving more. But you want to ground that in what you want to learn and what's important to you and why it's important. So I thank you for participating, Karen.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Any other comments or anything from anybody on sort of like this idea of reclaiming your agency, like within the week or within your projects? Great comment from Nancy in the chat. And I can say at my organization now, I've put together sort of like, we haven't done an annual report in the traditional sense in a while. And so they're doing that now, but I couldn't not communicate with my donors. Like, because part of what I'm doing is on the alumni fundraising side. So they're already in communication. So I needed to make sure I wasn't delaying what I wanted to communicate within that. So I tried to find what are the things that I can push forward? How can I leverage some of the outlines or some of the work that what other people are doing? Craft it for my particular audience and know that, we will build on that and have better timelines and collaboration in the future. But I needed to keep things moving in terms of my goals. Does
One
anyone
thing-
else?
Oh, sure. I was just gonna say, sometimes when there are too many things on my plate that need to get done and there's just no possible way, it's sometimes easier to have somebody else say, this is what you need to focus on, right? Putting that onus onto somebody else to restructure as needed. And that can sort of unblock what, and help you move forward. At least that's what I found.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I had a medical challenge last year that made it really difficult in terms of like a side effect from the medication to plan. Like, I would sit and I'd be stuck. Like, my mind wasn't working the way I'm used to it working, which was really hard for me. And my identity was like always being able to figure things out. And one of the things that I got to lean on was my village. And like literally some friends would just help me plan my week or help me figure out what was important or some of the conversation I need to have or review some other things. And it was thankfully temporary, but it can certainly be super beneficial to have someone outside of you. And sometimes I'll use ChatGPT in that way too. It's like, here's what I have going on. What's priority? What's a common thread between this? And then I'll have a conversation and, you know, somebody tries to add something to my plate and say, hey, okay, well, what do we want to drop off? Or what would you be okay with dropping off if you want me to prioritize this? And I think another challenge for us that have been doing it all and are expected to be superheroes is communicating that, because a version of us could get it all done, you know, under the right circumstances. If, you know, a kid isn't sick and, you know, it's not Easter break or spring break, and you know, we've been eating well and we feel great, but we can't just compare ourselves to other versions of ourselves. We can't just compare ourselves to other people that could also get things done. We have to look at the reality of our circumstances, our energy, and our time right now as we're making some of these decisions. So it's definitely great to pair off with someone to help you with those priorities and give yourself way more time to get things done. And the energy is to have some luxuriousness in their work as well. Any other comments? Very. I kind of talked through a little bit about this in terms of addressing challenges on a regular basis. I think if you are one that is using your calendar, then go all in using your calendar. Like, put in some refueling activities, put in a buffer at the end of the meeting because you know it's always long, or you know that you're going to have want time to send a follow-up email. I like to think of the things that I might put an hour block for something that really is going to take me 10 minutes, because I know that at some point between 3 and 4, this is going to happen. It doesn't mean I don't do anything else within that time, but it just means that I thought it was important enough to prioritize and do in that way. And then taking action to really reduce that workload and going back to those key components of, like, am I seeing things that feel fair? Am I feeling like I'm recognizing others? Do I feel like I have a community while I'm working on these things, even if I'm working independently? Are there people and things that are within my sphere of control that I can do? And then using spaces like this to kind of figure out, wow, we have some common challenges, right? Like, there could have been a session particularly about annual reports, right? Like, how can we work on our annual reports together? Or what are some things that we can take and make into a template? How do we make it easy for someone to pick up so that we can take sort of breaks away, or we can share the load with volunteers or other colleagues, or just make it easier to talk about as well. See your note, Karen. I love that. You know, holding a team accountable to what you say is important as well. So using any kind of triggers and cues are great. So lastly, I want to share a little bit of framework of how I look at some of my goals. And I think when we're doing a lot of things and we have competing priorities, it's really easy, as we saw today, to like, I haven't made any progress, like, or I haven't made the right kinds of progress, or I'm just not where I expected to be or I want to be. So one of the things that I do, and I literally keep this in a spreadsheet right now, is I'm looking at what are my goals for the quarter and what's my theme of, like, the flow of my energy. So for me, Q1 in fundraising is really about recognition. It's about scoping the work for the year. Like, what did I learn about last year? What were some of the things that I want to flag to other people of, like, hey, this could have happened with more support. And by the way, here are the results that came up from the annual report, and here's why that happened. And here are some of the ways that that's sustainable or not. So I do this framework called WRAP, where I'm looking at my wins, like what are things that I'm really proud of? What are just flat out results? The results are taking an observer, like a journalist approach to this happened. I scheduled these meetings, or if you didn't schedule the meetings, you sent the emails, right? Because you can't control whether somebody accepts or schedules a meeting, but you made the effort. and recognizing and celebrating effort is important to me as a result. Alignment or what are the things that I'm learning that are sharpening my approach, right? Or what are the things that I am getting informed about from my board, from my manager, from my colleagues that really help me decide this is the direction we want to go in, this is the level of clarity that we have, and how am I documenting that so that I'm giving myself credit from what I'm learning along the way, right? Not just what I'm doing, not just who I'm being. And then pivots for P in RAP is really about what are the things that I'm going to be changing, right? Like, okay, I've been trying to do this report for 4 weeks. It's been on my priorities for 4 weeks. Clearly, I might need to make it a little smaller, or I might need to have a different why, going back to what are the things that we control? What's my purpose? And so for me, no one's really looking for a report. I don't really need it. Then it might be, hey, I actually want to help somebody else in their role. And if I reframe sort of like my why of how I want to put that together, that changes the way that I approach it. And then I can break it down by slide or by report, or, the fact that I'm going to mentor someone through it, and that can help me change the way I approach work. And that's how I do my wrap. And so I'd love, as we end, I know that you stay around for some networking as well. I'd love to hear or to read, so we'll need to jump a little early, any power actions that you're planning to do in the next week to help you feel more in control of fighting burnout or better managing your bandwidth and capacity. And then stop sharing.
I guess like some of us, there's kind of this up and down movement of impact. And last week was a crazy week. I was in the office about an hour each day and out at meetings and running here and running there. And I'm noticing that this week is not bad at all. So
In
I'm really
comparison, right?
yeah, like yay. But I'm really focusing on what's really bothering me now are all the papers on my desk and next to my desk. Because when I'm out at a lot of meetings like that, I come in, I drop stuff, pick up the next thing or the next agenda or whatever and run out. And I come back and I drop stuff. So I think what's going to make me feel better at the end of this week is to get rid of one of the stacks of paper on my desk.
All right, let's do it. Thank you for sharing. What else can we commit to? Or Lauren, I'm sure you have your own thing, how you end this. I won't take you all the way through your 4 o'clock or.
Thank you, Diaris. Appreciate your time sharing so much really great tips as well as examples with us. This has been really exciting. With that, we'll open it up to our traditional networking. Anybody want to share information that's going on? We are going to be meeting next month. And we're going to continue on with the conversation about planned giving that we had in 2023. Diaris, you're welcome to join us if you'd like.
Thank you so much for having me. And so, maybe I shall. All right. I'm going to jump. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. It was lovely sharing the space with you all. And know that I'm rooting for you this week. Like miraculous amounts of ease and things coming to you, and just like insight light bulbs all the way through. Take care.
Thank you, Diaris.
Mhm.
I'm going to stop the